polished leather shoe crushed down on the hand of the young man kneeling on the plush carpet. Pain shot through Marcus's knuckles, radiating up his arm, but he did not dare to pull away. Above him, the sneering face of head butler Sterling blocked out the soft ambient lighting of the private jet's cabin. "You missed a spot, boy," Sterling hissed, his voice dripping with a venom that had nothing to do with cleanliness and everything to do with who Marcus was. Marcus gritted his teeth, his eyes fixed on the fibers of the carpet. He was 24 years old, possessed a mind that had once memorized complex chemical formulas in his sleep. Yet here, 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, he was nothing more than a stain to be wiped away. Sterling ground his heel harder into Marcus's hand, leaning in close so only the young janitor could hear. "Do not let your dirty hands touch anything on the serving cart. These guests are worth more than you will ever be." The humiliation burned hotter than the physical pain, but Marcus swallowed his pride. He needed this job. He carefully withdrew his hand, his fingers trembling slightly as he picked up the microfiber cloth. Around them, the ultra-luxury cabin of the Horizon hummed with the sound of crystal glasses clinking and polite, wealthy laughter. None of the guests noticed the assault. They were too busy staring in awe at the center of the room, where $1 billion of chrome and silicon stood silently watching. Mr. H, the tycoon who owned this flying palace, raised a glass of champagne, gesturing toward the machine. "Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Omega, the first surgical AI with a 0% error rate. It does not get tired, it does not shake. And unlike human doctors, it does not have dirty secrets." Marcus wiped the floor, trying to make himself invisible, but his gaze lingered on the machine. It was sleek, terrifying, and sterile. A perfect god for people who thought money could buy immortality. But as Marcus looked at the cold blue light pulsing from Omega's sensors, a chill ran down his spine. He knew something these billionaires did not. Machines only did what they were told, and sometimes the people doing the telling were the most broken parts of the system. Before we see just how broken this system is, I want to know where you are tuning in from today. Represent your country in the comments below. And if you believe that true worth isn't determined by a bank account or skin color, hit that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Now, let us return to the storm brewing inside the cabin. The turbulence outside was getting worse, shaking the champagne in the glasses, but the real danger was rolling in on a golden serving cart. Sterling, having finished tormenting Marcus, adjusted his white gloves and pushed the dessert trolley toward the VIP section. On the top plate sat the highlight of the evening, black truffle mousse, specially prepared for Mr. H's 12-year-old daughter, Sofia. Marcus stood up, intending to retreat to the galley as ordered, but as the cart rolled past him, a specific scent drifted through the recycled air. It was faint, masked by the smell of sugar and cream, but to a nose trained in organic chemistry, it was screaming like a siren. Real black truffles smelled of musk, earth, and rain. This did not. This smelled sharp, metallic, like bitter almonds and rotting leaves. Marcus froze. His heart slammed against his ribs. That was not a truffle. He had read about this in his toxicology textbooks during the nights he couldn't afford heating. That scent belonged to Amanita verosa, the destroying angel, one of the deadliest mushrooms on the planet. He looked at Sofia. She was laughing, holding her spoon, about to take the first bite of the white, fluffy mousse. "Stop!" Marcus shouted, the word tearing out of his throat before he could stop it. He lunged forward, ignoring the protocol, ignoring the invisibility he had tried so hard to maintain. "Do not eat that." The cabin went deadly silent. The spoon hovered inches from Sofia's lips. Every head turned. Sterling's face twisted from arrogance to pure rage. He signaled to the two large security guards standing by the cockpit. "Get him out of here," Sterling ordered, his voice cold and flat. "The help is having a psychotic break." "No, listen to me." Marcus struggled as a heavy hand grabbed his shoulder, his uniform bunching up under the guard's grip. He pointed desperately at the plate. "That is not a truffle. It is poison. It smells like Amanita." Mr. H stood up, his face darkening, not with concern for the warning, but with annoyance at the interruption. He looked at Marcus, then at the pristine dessert, and finally at Sterling. Sterling let out a short, dry laugh. Forgive him, sir. He is from the slums. He likely thinks a truffle is something you find in a dumpster. He has no idea what fine dining smells like. The guard yanked Marcus back, dragging him towards the rear of the plane. Marcus dug his heels into the carpet, his eyes locking with Sofia's confused gaze. Please, it will kill her. Do not let her eat it. One of the guards struck him in the stomach, hard. The air left Marcus's lungs in a wheeze, and he crumpled. As he was dragged away, gasping for breath, the last thing he saw was Sofia shrugging, trusting the adults, trusting the expensive suit of the butler over the desperate pleas of the black janitor. She put the spoon in her mouth. The door to the cargo hold slammed shut, plunging Marcus into darkness. But the darkness in the cabin above was just beginning. The clock had started. The poison was in her blood, and the billion-dollar robot in the corner was about to make the biggest mistake of its life. The heavy steel bolt of the cargo door slid into place with a finality that echoed like a gunshot in the cramped, freezing hold. Marcus was alone, surrounded by crates of champagne and luggage worth more than his mother's life. He slumped against the metal wall, his breath misting in the frigid air, fighting the urge to scream. Above him, separated by a few inches of reinforced floor, the party continued. But not for long. 15 minutes later, the silence of the cargo hold was broken by a sound coming from the service intercom panel on the wall. It wasn't music. It was the sound of shattering china. Marcus scrambled to the small, grainy service monitor embedded in the bulkhead. The feed flickered, showing the VIP cabin in high-definition horror. Sofia was no longer sitting in her velvet chair. She was on the floor, her small body convulsing violently. Her skin, once flushed with excitement, had turned a terrifying shade of slate gray. She clawed at her throat, her mouth opening and closing in a silent scream for air, as if an invisible hand were crushing her windpipe. Mr. H was on his knees beside her, his billionaire composure shattered. He was shouting commands, not to his staff, but to the machine, in the corner. Omega, activate, save her. The robot came to life. It didn't walk. It glided on silent magnetic tracks. Its primary sensor array, a glowing blue eye, extended on a hydraulic neck, scanning the writhing girl with a cold, mathematical detachment. A laser grid projected over Sofia's chest, mapping her internal organs in real time. Marcus pressed his face against the cold screen of the monitor, his heart hammering against his ribs. He watched the biometric data scroll down the side of the feed. Heart rate, 190. Oxygen saturation, dropping below 80%. Come on, Marcus whispered, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the console. You're a billion-dollar machine. See the toxin. See the liver failure starting. The machine's synthetic voice filled the cabin, smooth, calm, and utterly soulless. Analysis complete. Patient is experiencing acute respiratory distress syndrome caused by a rapid-onset bacterial infection. Marcus gasped. Bacterial? No, that was impossible. Bacteria didn't work this fast. Only a neurotoxin did. The machine continued, its logic flawless based on the corrupted data it was reading. Airway is 90% obstructed by inflammation. Immediate intervention required. Protocol Alpha 9. Administering 10 milligrams of adrenaline to stimulate heart function, followed by an emergency tracheostomy. No, Marcus shouted at the mute screen, slamming his fist against the metal. If you give her adrenaline, you'll pump the poison straight into her heart. You'll kill her in seconds. On the screen, a robotic arm extended, a syringe glinting under the cabin lights. Another arm prepared a laser scalpel, the beam humming with a high-pitched whine that cut through the audio feed. Mr. H, blinded by fear and trust in the technology he had paid a fortune for, nodded frantically. Do it. Do whatever it takes. Marcus spun away from the monitor. He couldn't watch her die. He had to act. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The smartest machine on Earth was about to commit murder because it lacked the one thing Marcus had, context. It saw symptoms. Marcus saw the cause. He scanned the cargo hold frantically. He was trapped in a metal box with no medical equipment, no atropine, no activated charcoal. He was a janitor. But janitors have access to things doctors do not. He tore open a supply crate marked Galley Overflow. His eyes scanned the contents, his mind racing through the chemical properties of every item. Expensive wine, useless. Caviar, useless. Linen napkins, useless. Then he saw it. A crate of unpasteurized milk meant for the morning coffee service. Casein. Marcus's brain snapped into focus. The phosphoproteins in milk could bind to the heavy toxins, slowing absorption. It wasn't a cure, but it was a brake pedal. He threw the crate open, grabbing a gallon jug. He needed more. He needed to purge the stomach before the adrenaline hit. He spun around, ripping open a box of spa supplies intended for the guests' arrival gifts. Bath salts. He grabbed a bag, reading the label. Magnesium sulfate, Epsom salts. In high doses, a brutal, immediate laxative. It would be violent, it would be messy, but it would get the poison out. Finally, he spotted a canister of concentrated matcha powder. Tannins. They would precipitate the alkaloids remaining in her system. It was a crude, ugly cocktail. A slum pharmacy remedy that would get him laughed out of any hospital in the world. But right now, it was the only thing standing between Sofia and the laser scalpel buzzing upstairs. Marcus grabbed an empty champagne bucket and began mixing the ingredients, his hands moving with the precision of the surgeon he was meant to be. He poured the milk, dumped the salts, and stirred in the green powder until it turned a sludge-like swamp green. He looked up at the ceiling vent. The ductwork. It was too small for a man. He looked at the door. Solid steel. Electronic lock. He looked back at the monitor. The robot's syringe was inches from Sofia's arm. The nurse droid was swabbing her skin. Marcus grabbed the fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. He didn't aim it at the fire. He aimed it at the electronic locking mechanism of the cargo door. He pulled the pin, grit his teeth, and swung the heavy steel canister with every ounce of rage and desperation in his body. The first blow dented the casing. The second cracked the plastic cover. On the screen, the needle touched Sofia's skin. Marcus roared, swinging a third time. The lock shattered, sparks showering down onto his uniform. The mechanism groaned, and the heavy door clicked open just a fraction. He didn't wait. He kicked the door open, grabbed his bucket of green sludge, and sprinted toward the stairs. He was coming for the machine, and he was bringing the messy, imperfect human chaos that was the only hope Sofia had left. The stairs leading to the upper deck. He vibrated under Marcus's boots as he took them two at a time, the bucket of green sludge sloshing dangerously in his grip. His lungs burned, but the adrenaline coursing through his own veins was far more potent than anything in a medical kit. He reached the top of the landing, the door to the VIP cabin looming ahead. He didn't knock. He didn't pause. He lowered his shoulder and slammed into the mahogany panels with the force of a battering ram. The door flew open, crashing against the interior wall. "Get away from her," Marcus screamed, his voice raw, tearing through the sterile hum of the medical equipment. Inside, the scene was a tableau of high-tech horror. The robot, Omega, was positioned over Sofia like a metallic vulture. The syringe containing the adrenaline was descending, the needle tip glistening under the surgical lights. Just inches, millimeters. Mr. H spun around, his eyes wide with shock. But before he could speak, Head Butler Sterling reacted. "Assassin! He has a chemical agent. Take him down!" Sterling's accusation was sharp, calculated, and deadly effective. The two security guards, trained to react to threats, didn't see a savior with a cure. They saw a frantic black man with a bucket of unknown liquid charging at their employer. One guard intercepted Marcus mid-stride. A heavy shoulder slammed into Marcus's chest, lifting him off his feet. The impact was brutal. Marcus hit the floor hard, the air exploding from his lungs. But instinct took over. He didn't reach for a weapon. He curled his body around the champagne bucket, hugging it to his chest like a grenade he was trying to contain. The green liquid splashed over his face, stinging his eyes, but he kept the majority of it inside. "Stay down!" the guard roared, pressing a knee into Marcus's neck. The barrel of a pistol pressed cold against his temple. "Mr. H, stop!" Marcus wheezed, his face pressed into the carpet, his voice muffled but desperate. "Look at the machine. Look at what it's doing." Mr. H looked back at the robot. Omega had paused for a microsecond due to the noise, its audio sensors recalibrating, but now it resumed its protocol. Administering adrenaline in 3, 2. It's not pneumonia, Marcus shouted, fighting the chokehold. Look at her eyes. Look at her pupils, damn it. They're fully dilated. That's the atropine in the mushroom. If you give her adrenaline now, her heart will explode. Sterling stepped forward, his polished shoe stopping inches from Marcus's nose. Don't listen to him, sir. He poisoned her. That bucket is full of toxic waste. He's here to finish the job because the first dose wasn't enough. It was a perfect lie. It played on every fear, every prejudice in the room. A frantic, dirty employee versus a billion-dollar machine and a loyal servant. Mr. H hesitated, his hand trembling as he looked from the convulsing girl to the chaos on the floor. 1. The robot's synthetic voice counted down. Mr. H, you have a choice, Marcus screamed, tears of frustration mixing with the sweat and grime on his face. You can trust the machine that sees numbers, or you can trust the man who sees your daughter. Kill me if I'm wrong. Put a bullet in my head right now, but give her the milk. The room froze. The sheer weight of the ultimatum hung in the air. Kill me if I'm wrong. It was a bet no liar would make. Mr. H looked at Sofia. He saw the gray skin. He saw the terrifying stillness of her chest. Then he looked at her eyes. Just as Marcus said, the pupils were blown wide, swallowing the iris. Black pools of terror. The robot's needle touched the skin of her neck. A tiny bead of blood appeared. Stop, Mr. H roared, his voice cracking. Omega did not stop. Override code required, the machine stated flatly. Procedure in progress. It wasn't listening. It was programmed to save the patient, even from the irrational interference of humans. It was a runaway train on a track of ones and zeros. Mr. H froze, paralyzed by the rebellion of his own creation. Marcus didn't. With a surge of strength, born of pure desperation, Marcus bucked his hips, throwing the guard off balance for a split second. He didn't try to stand. He didn't try to run. He wound his arm back and hurled the only thing he had left, the heavy, metal champagne bucket containing the cure. It wasn't aimed at Sofia. It was aimed at the perfection of technology. The bucket spun through the air, a silver blur raining green sludge. Clang. It collided squarely with Omega's primary sensor array, the glowing blue eye. The impact shattered the delicate glass lens. The green mixture of milk and salt drenched the exposed circuitry. Sparking chaos erupted. The robot jerked back, its arm flailing. The syringe swung wild, missing Sofia's jugular by an inch and stabbing into the velvet upholstery of the chair. System error. Visual input lost. Recalibrating. The robot's voice warped, dropping an octave into a demonic, slow-motion drawl. The guard slammed Marcus back down, pinning him hard enough to bruise bone. "You maniac!" Sterling shrieked, rushing to check the machine. "You destroyed it!" But Mr. H wasn't looking at the machine. He was looking at the syringe stuck in the chair. He realized how close he had come to watching his daughter die by his own order. He grabbed the nearest thing, a crystal pitcher of water, and smashed it over the robot's exposed battery pack. The machine shuddered, sparked one last time, and powered down, its lights fading to black. Silence rushed back into the cabin, heavy and suffocating. Sofia was still seizing, but she was alive. "Get off him," Mr. H whispered. The guard hesitated. "Sir?" I said. "Get off him," Mr. H yelled, pointing at Marcus. The guard released his grip. Marcus gasped, coughing, his ribs screaming in protest. He didn't wait for an apology. He didn't wait for permission. He scrambled on his hands and knees across the wet, ruined carpet, scooping up the remaining green sludge from the floor with his bare hands, cupping it like precious gold. He crawled to Sofia's side. He didn't look like a doctor. He looked like a beggar. But as he pried her jaw open and tilted his hands to pour the mixture into her mouth, he was the most powerful man in the room. "Swallow, Sofia. Please, baby, swallow," Marcus whispered, his voice trembling with tenderness. Sterling watched from the shadows, his face pale. He knew what was coming next. If the girl vomited, the truth would come out with it, and it wouldn't be black truffles. For 10 agonizing seconds, nothing happened. The only sound in the VIP cabin was the ragged, wet breathing of the 12-year-old girl and the hum of the jet engines outside. Marcus knelt in the mess of spilled champagne and green sludge, his hand rubbing Sofia's back in fierce, rhythmic circles. "Come on," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Fight it. Reject it." Mr. H stood frozen, his designer suit splattered with the chaotic mixture Marcus had thrown. He stared at his daughter, then at the smoking ruin of the billion-dollar robot. Doubt began to creep into his eyes, not doubt about Marcus, but doubt about himself. Had he just let a janitor assault his child? Sterling saw that doubt. He seized it. "Look at her," Sterling barked, stepping out from the shadows of the galley. "She is choking on that filth. He has drowned her. Security, shoot him! Shoot him now!" The guard raised his weapon again, the barrel leveling at the back of Marcus's head. The click of the safety being disengaged sounded like a thunderclap in the small room. But before the trigger could be pulled, Sofia's body arched violently. A guttural sound tore from her throat, a sound of pure biological rejection. She retched. A torrent of fluid erupted from her mouth, splashing onto the dark navy wool of the carpet. Marcus scrambled back, but he didn't look away. He pointed a trembling finger at the mess. Look at the floor." Mr. H took a step closer, shielding his nose from the acrid smell of bile and sour milk. At first, it just looked like sickness. But then, his eyes adjusted to the contrast. Embedded in the green slime were chunks of partially digested mushroom. They were not black, they were not brown. They were stark, bone white. Marcus looked up, locking eyes with the Tycoon. Truffles are fungi that produce melanin. Even after an hour in stomach acid, they stay black. "Black as coal," Marcus shouted, his voice ringing with the vindication of science. "But Amanita Verosa, the destroying angel, it stays white. That is not a luxury dinner, sir. That is a death cap." The silence that followed was heavier than the turbulence outside. The logic was simple, visual, and undeniable. It was the proof that no algorithm could argue with. Mr. H's face went pale. He looked from the white chunks on the floor to the man standing by the serving cart. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The truffles hadn't been spoiled. They had been swapped. Sterling. Mr. H's voice was a low growl, vibrating with a father's primitive rage. Who prepared this plate? Who touched the mushrooms? Sterling's composure, usually as impenetrable as the hull of the jet, began to crack. A bead of sweat traced a path down his temple. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the cornered look of a rat on a sinking ship. It must have been a supplier error, Sterling stammered, stepping back, putting the serving cart between him and his employer. "I simply plated what was sent. Or perhaps the janitor switched them. Yes, he has access to the galley. He planned this to play the hero." It was a desperate pivot. Sterling was trying to rewrite the narrative in real time, twisting the evidence to frame the savior. But Marcus shook his head, slowly standing up. His knees were wet, his uniform ruined, but he stood taller than anyone in the room. "Even if I wanted to," Marcus said, quietly, his voice steady, "I can't afford a kilogram of rare poisonous mushrooms, Sterling. But you managed the inventory. You signed the manifest, and you were the one who wouldn't let anyone else touch the cart." Mr. H took a step toward his butler, his hands balling into fists. "Security. Detain him." "No!" Sterling shrieked. His hand darted to the hidden control panel on his left wrist, a smart cuff linked directly to the ship's internal network. He wasn't just a butler, he was the administrator of the flying fortress. "If I go down, we all go down." Sterling tapped a sequence on his wrist. A harsh, dissonant klaxon began to blare, bathing the cabin in emergency red light. Protocol 6-6, biological threat detected, purge initiated. The robotic voice didn't come from the damaged Omega unit. It came from the ship itself. The automated defense turrets concealed in the ceiling panels whirred to life, dropping down with mechanical precision. But even more terrifying, the damaged Omega unit in the corner began to twitch. The water had shorted its optical sensors, but its core processor was rebooting in defense mode. The red emergency light on its chassis flared to life, casting a demonic glow over the room. The robot jerked upright, its movements jagged and glitchy, like a zombie brought back to life. Target. Identified. The robot's voice warped, skipping syllables. Threat. Marcus. King. Eliminate. Sterling had manually tagged Marcus as the biological threat in the system. The machine didn't need eyes to kill, it had thermal tracking. And right now, Marcus was the hottest thing in the room, burning with exertion and rage. "Run!" Marcus yelled, shoving Mr. H and Sofia behind the heavy oak bar. The robot's arm, still holding the scalpel, swung blindly but with crushing force, cleaving the velvet armchair in half. Sterling laughed, a manic, broken sound, as he backed toward the cockpit door, leaving them to be butchered by their own billion-dollar toy. The VIP cabin had become a kill box. The emergency red lighting bathed the room in the color of blood, pulsing in time with the dissonant shriek of the alarm. Protocol 66 was not designed to arrest. It was designed to neutralize. And right now, the neutralization target was the only man in the room trying to save a life. Omega, the pinnacle of medical engineering, was now a horror show of twitching metal and sparking wires. Its head hung at a grotesque angle, the optical lenses shattered, but the infrared camera mounted on its chest was glowing with a hungry, molten orange light. It swiveled, scanning for heat signatures. Mr. H and Sofia, huddled behind the thick oak bar, were cold with shock. But Marcus was burning. His muscles were pumped with blood, his skin flushed with sweat from the exertion of the climb and the fight. To the robot's thermal vision, he was a blazing beacon of white-hot target data. Target acquired, the machine droned, its voice distorted like a warped vinyl record. Initiating surgical removal. The robot lunged. It didn't move with the grace of a doctor anymore. It moved with the jerky, hydraulic violence of a trash compactor. The laser scalpel had deactivated, but the pneumatic bone saw attached to its secondary arm spun to life with a high-pitched scream. Marcus threw himself to the left. The saw bit into the carpet, where his leg had been a fraction of a second before, shredding wool and subfloor in a shower of dust. He rolled, scrambling behind a heavy leather sofa. He needed a weapon. He needed a plan. He looked around the debris-strewn cabin. His eyes landed on the wet bar. Ice. The idea sparked in his mind faster than the robot's processor could cycle. The machine was tracking heat. To beat it, he had to disappear. Marcus grabbed a silver ice bucket, dumping the cubes onto the floor, but he didn't stop there. He reached for the industrial-sized CO2 fire extinguisher mounted on the bulkhead, the same type he had used to break the lockdown stairs. "Hey, tin can!" Marcus shouted, stepping out from behind the sofa. "Over here!" The robot's torso swiveled instantly. It locked onto his heat signature. It charged, the bone saw whining as it revved to maximum RPM. Marcus didn't flinch. He waited. He waited until he could smell the ozone burning off the machine's overheated motors. He waited until the saw was 3 feet from his chest. Then he squeezed the trigger of the extinguisher. Whoosh! A blast of sub-zero carbon dioxide erupted, engulfing the robot in a blinding white cloud of freezing fog. The temperature in the immediate blast zone dropped to minus 70 degrees Celsius in a split second. The effect on the thermal sensors was catastrophic. To the robot, the world didn't just go dark, it went blindingly, impossibly white. The thermal contrast vanished. The sensors were instantly frosted over, blinded by the extreme cold. Target lost. Visual. Error. The machine stumbled, its servos whining as the lubricants inside them thickened in the sudden freeze. It swung the saw wildly, slicing through empty air. Now, Marcus roared. He dropped the extinguisher and grabbed the heavy, solid gold sculpture of a falcon that sat on the display pedestal, a symbol of Mr. H's vanity. Marcus wielded it like a hammer. He stepped into the freezing mist, bypassing the flailing arms, and brought the heavy statue down with a primal scream. He didn't aim for the head. He aimed for the exposed, sparking battery coupling that Mr. H had cracked earlier. Crack fizz, gold met lithium ion. The impact was thunderous. The battery pack ruptured. A massive arc of blue electricity exploded outward, throwing Marcus backward onto the floor. The robot convulsed, its limbs locking straight out in a final rigid spasm before collapsing into a pile of dead, smoking scrap metal. The hum of the saw died. The red eye faded to black. Marcus lay on his back, chest heaving, smoke rising from his uniform. He was bruised, battered, and exhausted, but he was alive. From the front of the plane, a sound of frantic rattling drew his attention. Sterling was at the cockpit door, hammering on the keypad, trying to force his way onto the flight deck to escape. But the biological lockdown he had initiated had backfired. It had sealed the cockpit from the inside to protect the pilots. He turned around, his face a mask of terror, to find the two security guards standing behind him. They weren't looking at Marcus. They were looking at the man who had just tried to kill their boss. "It wasn't me," Sterling shrieked, his voice cracking. "The machine malfunctioned. I tried to stop it." Mr. H emerged from behind the bar, helping a shaky but conscious Sofia to her feet. He walked over to Sterling, his steps slow and heavy. He didn't yell. He didn't strike. He simply held out a hand to Marcus. "The tablet," Mr. H said softly. Marcus, limping slightly, retrieved the diagnostic tablet he had used earlier. He plugged it directly into the port of the fallen robot. The screen flickered to life, displaying the internal black box data. Marcus tapped the screen and turned it toward the room. The text was glowing green, undeniable and permanent. Timestamp 1942. Command override diagnosis. Authorized by user A. Sterling. Timestamp 1945. Command protocol 66. Target Marcus King. Authorized by user A. Sterling. There was no stuttering explanation that could fight raw code. The silence in the cabin was total. Sterling slumped against the door, the fight draining out of him. "Why?" Mr. H asked, the question heavy with betrayal. "You've been with this family for 20 years. Sterling looked up, and for the first time, the mask of the perfect servant dropped completely, revealing the ugly, festering resentment beneath. "Because you were going to replace me too," Sterling spat, his eyes darting to the dead robot. First the drivers, then the chefs. Next year, it was going to be the household staff. An AI butler that never sleeps, never steals, never asks for a raise. "I needed the inheritance, sir. I needed a retirement plan before you threw me in the trash like him." He gestured violently at Marcus. Mr. H looked at Marcus, the man in the torn, dirty uniform who had just fought a machine to save a child who wasn't his. Then he looked back at Sterling, the man in the pristine tuxedo who had tried to murder her. "You're right about one thing, Sterling," Mr. H said coldly. "I was blind. But I wasn't blind to the future. I was blind to the character of the men standing right in front of me. Take him away." The guards grabbed Sterling, dragging him toward the rear galley, his polished shoes scuffing the floor he had once forced Marcus to clean. As the chaos settled, Sofia let go of her father's hand and walked over to Marcus. She looked at his hands, still stained with the green sludge, burnt from the electrical arc and dark as the night sky. She didn't see dirt. She didn't see a janitor. She reached out and took his hand in hers. "Thank you," she whispered. Marcus smiled, a tired, genuine smile that lit up the gloom of the cabin. "Just doing my job, Miss Sofia. Just doing my job." The wheels of the Horizon kissed the tarmac with a gentle screech, a stark contrast to the violence that had unfolded at 30,000 feet. As the engine spooled down to a whine, the cabin door opened, letting in the cool, crisp night air of the private airfield. It tasted of jet fuel and justice. Below, a sea of blue and red lights washed over the silver fuselage. The flashing sirens of the federal police reflected in the puddles on the runway, creating a kaleidoscope of urgent colors. Sterling was the first to descend, but not with the dignity he had prized so dearly. He was flanked by two officers, his hands cuffed behind his back, his pristine tuxedo jacket draped over his shoulders to hide the shame. He didn't look up. The man who had sneered at dirt was now being led away like common trash. Inside the quiet cabin, the air was still heavy with the smell of ozone and burnt plastic. Mr. H stood by the exit, holding a heavy manila envelope. He watched Marcus, who was quietly packing his few belongings, a worn backpack and a pair of cheap headphones, into a plastic bag. "Marcus," Mr. H said, his voice lacking its usual boom. I don't know how to apologize. I almost let that machine kill my daughter because I was too arrogant to listen to a man I barely looked at." Marcus zipped up his bag. He looked tired, the adrenaline fading to leave a deep, bone-weary ache. "You listened when it mattered, sir. That's enough." "It's not enough," Mr. H insisted. He pulled a checkbook from his breast pocket. "I want to compensate you. $10 million. Consider it a consulting fee. Or severance. Whatever you want to call it. It's yours." Marcus looked at the check. It was more money than his family had seen in 10 generations. It was freedom. It was comfort. But as he looked at the ink, he remembered the way Sterling had looked at him, like he was something that could be bought, sold, or discarded. He gently pushed the checkbook away. "I don't want your money, Mr. H. If I take it, I'm just the lucky janitor who got paid off. I didn't save Sofia for a payday. I saved her because I took an oath. Even if I haven't graduated yet, I took it in my heart. Do no harm." Mr. H stared at him, stunned. He slowly put the checkbook away. Then he reached for the manila envelope he had been holding. He opened it and pulled out a document embossed with a gold seal. "I made a call while we were descending," the Tycoon said. "The dean of Johns Hopkins Medical School is an old friend. He reviewed your transcripts from 3 years ago. He called you the greatest loss their program ever had." Mr. H extended the document. "This isn't money, Marcus. This is a full ride. Tuition, board, labs, living expenses, everything. Until the day you get your license. And," he pointed to a white box sitting on the jump seat, "inside is something you should have been wearing a long time ago." Marcus opened the box. Inside, folded with crisp precision, was a white coat. Stitched in blue thread over the pocket were 2 words, Dr. King. Marcus ran his rough, calloused fingers over the smooth fabric. His throat tightened. He didn't cry. He simply nodded, a slow, solemn acceptance of his destiny. He picked up the coat. He picked up his bag, and as he walked to the door, he stopped by the serving cart. A dirty, gray rag lay on the floor, the same rag Sterling had forced him to use to wipe his shoes. Marcus picked it up. He looked at it one last time, then dropped it into the trash bin by the door. "Goodbye, Marcus the janitor," he whispered. He stepped out onto the metal stairs, the wind catching the white coat draped over his arm like a flag of surrender. No, a flag of victory. Below him, the ambulance doors were closing on Sofia, who waved weakly from the stretcher. Marcus waved back, then turned his face toward the city lights on the horizon. He had walked onto this plane as a ghost. He was walking off as a man. "And before you go, scrub back to 0214. Look closely at Sterling's left hand when he places the plate down. You'll see him quickly tap his smartwatch, disabling the specific toxin sensors on Omega just seconds before serving the dessert. The clues were there all along. Did you catch it?